welcome back to Grace for Her. All right, you guys, so let's just dive right in. Today's episode is called Grace to Go. And what I'm going to be talking about is our go. I'm going to basically share a little bit about our testimony with you. And it's not the full story because we are still walking this thing out, but I feel led to kind of share what this journey has been like, what it's looked like for us, how we've been feeling throughout it. Because I think a lot of times we wait till after we have gone through a thing and gotten over to the other side, that's when we want to share with the people. For whatever reason, whether it could be because it's like we still kind of iffy if it's gonna work out, and it's like, well, I don't want to share nothing till it worked out and then I could tell them. But I think that's exactly what people need to hear and what they need to see. They need to see you walking it out because, yeah, it's great that you got over to the other side, but what was the process like when you were going through it? Did you have moments of uncertainty? Did you have moments of doubt? Did you have moments of just like crying out to God, like, what are you doing here? Because this isn't making sense to me at all. I shared with you guys in a previous episode that there was a moment where I said to God, I was like, you got Anthony out here looking like fools. And God quickly responded to me by sending me that devotion from my friend where the author said, faith is the willingness to look foolish. It was like God directly saying to me, Hannah, are you willing to look foolish? That's a part of standing out. That's a part of stepping out on faith. And while everybody else, it may look foolish to them, but God is like, it's not foolish to me because I know the plans that I have for you. I know what I have in store for you. None of this is surprising to me. Do you trust me? A lot of times when we are going through things, it's not God not knowing whether or not, how, it's not like he doesn't know it's going to happen. It came to him as a surprise. He already knows. It's him showing us, like, do you have the faith to believe? You say you trust me. You say you believe me. You say that I am the God of the impossible and I can do all things. Do you really believe it? Prove to yourself that you believe this. Prove, show me that you're, about this life. And so this is why I want to share with you guys today what it's been like. So I'm going to take you all the way back to the beginning of this year. Because it was at the beginning of this year that Anthony and I were truly struggling whether or not it was time for him to submit notice at work. And so I know a lot of you may be new. It's been over a year since I was doing this podcast. So, and some of you may have forgotten our story, but for the past 18 years, Anthony was working at the church we were attending in Central Florida as the worship and arts and media director. And so that's a long time. That's a long time to be working someplace, and that's a long time to be at your church because they become family. And that's exactly what our church family was. They were family because Anthony and I had he moved to Orlando before I did to take the job. So he moved up there in 2006, and then I came in 2007 for school. And so anyways, that's where we started our life together because we got married in 2008. And that is where we bought our first 2 homes. That is where our children were born and raised. And that has been our life. And so, and all of our family was back in South Florida. So when we moved to Orlando, we didn't know anybody. So literally the church became our family. That is who became our village. And I am truly and will forever be grateful to them for being a part of our village and supporting us and loving on us the way that they have over the years and even now. So anyways, that is a little background. So at the beginning of this year, things with our son were starting to pick up. And when I say pick up, it's just so our son, he is a child actor, and I will talk a little bit more about that in future episodes, but he is a child actor, and he had got booked for a couple of jobs here in Georgia. So it was causing us to drive back and forth between Orlando and Georgia, just for his working purposes. And even though I was at home or working from home, Anthony was the one, like I had went with AJ a couple of times, and then Anthony was also going. But Anthony also was just feeling like he thinks the time is coming. He was like, Hannah, I really feel like I've done all that I can here, in regards to, like, he was feeling that there was a shift, that there was time to make room for others to grow. And because of the work schedule for our son, he did not want to, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not put pressure, but he didn't want to underserve the church in any capacity. You know, like, they were very gracious and, you know, would give him the time off that he needed and everything, but they also needed their employee to be there. So even though they were working with us, for Anthony, it was just like, I feel that the time periods are going to get longer, and I just want to set them up the best way I can to have somebody that can be there full time. So anyways, that in and of itself was a very hard thing for him to do, because like I said, he was there for 18 years. They were family, you know, and it is hard to step away from what's familiar, what's comfortable, what's safe. It's really hard to move from that. And so I was telling him, because of everything that was just happening around the same time, because here it was, we're like renting cars to go back and forth between Florida and Georgia. We were staying with the family who we had here in Georgia to save on having to, like, book a hotel and everything. But, like, after a while, that, you know, it takes a lot on you. And so I was saying to Anthony, I said, you know, I really think that this is a step of faith with you doing this, because he was also believing that this is what God was, and I should have said that first. He also believed that this is something that God was pushing him to do. Like, it's time to go. It's time to, like he told Abraham, to leave your father's house. It's time for you to go. And it was just hard. And so I remember having a conversation with him and telling him that I think it's once you take this step that we're going to start to see how God is going to provide. Because again, like, I don't know if you guys caught on to this, but yes, I was working for home, but I was working our business, Greater Entertainment. And so I was working for us, you know, we were being entrepreneurs. And so the main source of income in our household was Anthony's paycheck from the church, because I had not been working outside the home or for a company since 2022. And so, so the past 2 years, it has been the main income from the church, and then supplemental income of what we were making in our business. And just being transparent, the business was not making enough to support our household. So somebody needed to be working. So that in and of itself, him submitting his notice was a big leap of faith, because it's like, Hannah, I don't have anything else lined up. And what we're making with Greater Entertainment is not enough. Like, how are we going to sustain our family? So at that point, I started submitting my resume and applying for jobs. remote jobs because our son is virtual, our daughter isn't face to face, and so somebody need to be home with AJ. And so I was, submitting jobs, applying to jobs, not submitting. I was applying for jobs for remote positions so that I could continue working from home, but now also have a main source of income so that he could step off. And so one of the things that he said to me, and I don't remember if this was at the beginning of the year, if it was as months went by, but I know in time he did say to me that he heard the Lord say that he did not want us to move based on a job. And I want to say that he told that to me in the beginning, because what ended up happening was at some point with the back and forth between Georgia, the conversation came up of, I think we're supposed to move there. And I was like, who? Because I did not see myself living in Georgia. I was like, it is a nice place to come and visit, but to actually live, no. And so I just never saw. I've been a Florida girl. Like, yes, my family heritage is from the Caribbean. My people are from Jamaica and Trinidad, but I was born and raised in Florida. I am a Florida girl. Went from South Florida to Central Florida. Just thought that Florida would be my life, and here I am in Georgia. But I did not see that, and so I was just like, okay, well, I'm not so sure about that. Are you sure? And so we started talking about that, and in the beginning, I'll be honest, and I was honest with him about it. I felt like the move to Georgia was simply because of what was going on with our son. And so we had to have conversations about that, because I'm like, okay, yeah, right now while he's on this project, it's an inconvenience of the back and forth or whatever. But what if the next project he books is in Chicago, or it's in California, or someplace else? We gonna move there too, and it's so funny because, well, I'll get to that. Hopefully I don't forget. But the same words that I said to Anthony, our son ended up saying to me, because we ended up having a moment where we were talking to the kids about how they felt about the move. Now, I knew that our daughter Skylin was not keen to the move. And I'll get to that. And that's the thing too with the go. When you're told to go, it affects everybody, and so you're taking all of these things into consideration. And it's like, God, is this really what you want us to do? Like, how it's going to affect the adjustments that we have to make. Is this really, it's scary. It can be. And so anyways, but yeah, we had the conversation with the kids, and I ended up finding out that AJ at the time, who I thought out of all of us was good about the move, because the project that he was working on, he was able to work with other kids. So he was always looking forward to when he had to come up here and was just having a blast. So I thought he was good with it. And so, you can't assume. But I come to find out he was not. He was not good about it. He felt very sad that he was leaving his friends behind, and he was leaving the only place that he's known as home, leaving the church behind, all of those things. And so I was like, man, I'm really sorry. And I want to push pause there. Parents, don't be afraid to apologize to your kids. Don't be afraid to admit when you did something wrong. I took that moment to admit to my son that I was wrong in assuming that he was okay. I was wrong in not checking with him for myself to say, like, hey, I know you hear about the move where you see me packing up. Like, how do you feel about it? I had to apologize to him for not checking in with him and making sure that he was okay. And so, but one of the things that he said to me was like, if I book something here or there, we just gonna pick up and move there. And I was like, no, AJ. I was like, we're not. He's like, so why are we doing it for this? I said, because this is not just about what's going on with you. This is because this is where we feel God is telling us to go. And so I'm gonna explain to y'all how we even got there. Because I was apprehensive about the move and wasn't for it at first. Anthony is is the type of person who's just like, he doesn't want to do anything unless the both of us are on the same page about it. And so when he feels strongly about something and I am not on the same page with him, that frustrates him to like no end. And so he was just like, I can't do anything if you're not on board with this. And I told him, I said, well, I'm being honest with you that this is not where I see myself. This isn't where I see us. But if you believe that this is where we're supposed to go, then I'm with you. Like, just know that I have to process it. And I want to pause with that too, because I think sometimes we can allow the people who are closest to us to indirectly hinder us from going, indirectly hinder us from doing what we know God has called us to do because of that person. And we have to be okay with allowing that person to borrow our faith, because sometimes that person's not going to be able to see it. And if they're willing to go, and that's the difference, right? It would be one thing if I wasn't willing to go and I was like, well, I'm not going, you going by yourself. Now I'm causing dysfunction, I'm causing disconnection, I'm causing distinction between us, tension between us, because I'm being adamant about, well, I'm not going because God ain't tell me to go, so I don't know what you hear. If that was my verbiage, I could understand where the frustration is coming from, but that wasn't my verbiage. My verbiage was, I don't see it yet, but because I know you have a relationship with God and you're telling me that God told you this, I'm willing to go. And I'm asking, now this part I didn't say, this is what I wish I had said in that first conversation. I'm asking for the grace for you to give me the grace to process, to get there. That part I did not say. I did say I'm willing to go. I'm being honest with you about how I feel, that this isn't where I want to be. There's nothing about Georgia that was attractive to me that made me want to be there. So I'm being honest about that, and I'm willing to go. And I was hoping that that would be enough. And at the time it wasn't for him. So that led me to apply for jobs in Georgia, because I was just like, God, I don't know how else to show him that I'm in agreement to go. I don't know what else to do that will make him feel comfortable with moving forward with this, because I don't want to be a hindrance. If you're telling him this, then I'm believing, I'm borrowing his faith. And that was one of the things that I was sharing. It's okay for somebody to borrow your faith. The story that I'm reminded of in the Bible is when Elisha was in the valley with his assistant. I can't remember how to pronounce his name properly, but it starts with a G. But they saw themselves being surrounded, and so, or they knew that they were surrounded by I can't even remember who was coming after them. But in the story, what happens is that Elisha prays and asks God to open, I think his name is Gershon, to open Gershon's eyes so that he could see who was with them. Because Elisha was saying to him that they who are with us are more than those who are against us. And to me, that was Gershon having to borrow Elisha's faith. Like, before God opened his eyes to see for himself, Elisha was telling him, don't worry, don't be afraid. Like, there is more with us than those who are against us. And so Gershon was just like, all right, Elisha, I'm gonna believe you, but I'm scared. You know what I'm saying? And so it was Elisha's prayer. It was his faith calling out to God, asking God to open Gershon's eyes so that he could see the host of angels that were surrounded around them, that they were going to have the victory. So for me, that lets me know that it's okay to borrow my husband's faith or to borrow somebody else's faith so that I can see, Lord, I'm borrowing their faith because they have faith to believe, to see what I cannot see right now. And I want to see it too. So it's not just borrowing his faith, but it was borrowing his faith and seeking God for myself so that I could see it. Right. And so in doing so, I applied. And again, this is where you also have to put action to your faith. I'm borrowing Anthony's faith. I'm seeking God for myself. And I started applying for jobs in Georgia because of the faith, because faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. So what Anthony was able to see by faith, I was borrowing that. Okay, you're believing for us to go to Georgia. God, I'm seeking you for me to see this for myself. And while I'm seeking you, I'm going to apply for jobs in Georgia. So that's what happened. And when I kid you not, y'all, it was not until I started applying for jobs in Georgia that I actually started getting responses back. Mind you, Anthony and I, this is why I told you from the beginning of the year, Anthony and I were talking about how he needed to step down. I started applying for jobs back in February, okay? Back in February is when I started applying for all these different remote positions, whether they were in Orlando or they were where, like remote positions means you could work from anywhere, right? So I'm applying for all these remote positions, and the only thing that I was hearing other than crickets was, thank you for submitting your application. We've decided to move along with another candidate. That was it. Okay. So this is now getting into May. All right. I had been applying from February. In May is when I started applying for jobs in Georgia, and I actually started getting interviews, requests for interviews. And so I'm like, oh, okay, God, what is this? All these other jobs that I've been applying for, you haven't allowed me to hear anything back from. But as soon as I start applying for jobs in Georgia, now I'm getting requests for interviews. That's interesting. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay. Now, mind you, the jobs that I was applying for in Georgia were in-person positions, but I had applied for a couple of in-person positions in Orlando too, just to test the waters. And I did hear back, but that was even weird because the job called me, left me a voice message about if it was possible for me to come in the next day for an interview. I called the lady back. Now, mind you, I didn't get her voicemail until maybe 2 hours later. And Anthony's always like, see, this is why you got to check your emails all the time and check your voice messages so you can get back quickly. But here's the thing, y'all. I called her back within 2 hours of her voice message saying, yes, I'm available to come in for the interview. The woman never called me back. I even called the day of the interview early that morning to see if, hey, I don't know if you got my message from yesterday, but I'm willing. Do you still want me to come in? No answer. So for me, I was just like, I don't think it's meant for me to get a job here in Orlando. I think it is meant for me to work in Georgia. Even if at the minimum, this is just God saying, Hannah, yes, Georgia is the place. It's the destination, right? So I start, I go on the interviews and everything, right? And at this point, it's pushing into the summer now because actually, no, let me back up. I believe it was in, no, it wasn't May because I had it was in June. I'm sorry. That happened in June because here it is now the beginning of summer, and Anthony and I, we were talking and we were just like, all right, if we're going to move, we have to do it by this summer because of school. And we want to make sure that we are where we're going to be so that the kids can start school. And so this is where the conversations with the kids came up because of the fact that, Skylin was in her last year of middle school. So this new school year, she would be going in as an 8th grader, which means if we're moving, she's doing it at a whole new school with new kids. And that was concerning because I didn't want a repeat of her 6th grade year. And 6th grade was a similar thing because we had moved into a new neighborhood, and our neighborhood that we had moved into, there was a new school being built in our neighborhood. So our zoning changed, and the middle school that she was originally zoned for, she would have gone to with friends from her elementary school. But due to this rezoning that happened, she was the only person from her school that would have been going to this school, because where we moved out of the zone of her elementary school, but where we were zoned for was still zoned for the middle school. So anyways, long story short, 6th grade year, the beginning or the first half of it did not go so well for Sky because she didn't know anybody. She was sitting by herself at lunchtime. She really did not start making friends until after the winter break. And so I just did not want that for my child again. And so my heart was like breaking for her in regards to that. And so again, it's just little things like that I also had to learn to let go of, because I was holding on to that. I was just like, as if God doesn't love her more than me, as if God didn't grace her for this transition and for this shifting that was happening in our family. It was like I felt like I had to be the one to protect her. I had to be the one to make sure that everything was fine. And God had to work on me in that and say, Hannah, I need you to release her to me. I need you to trust me that I got her. And that was hard, y'all. To the mama bears out there, I know y'all relate. That is hard to do. And so anyways, going back to the story of everything, by this time I think Anthony had given his notice, and so he had given them until the end of July. So fast forward into July, I had went on a second interview for one of the jobs that I had applied for here in Georgia, and then it was like, okay, yeah, you should hear something from us by the end of next week. Well, the end of next week came, didn't hear anything. And it was just like, oh, well, I guess that's not it. That's not the job. I don't know what's happening. I haven't heard anything. And so this is where things started to get tight, because now here it is, like, we know we're going to Georgia. It's July. I found out that schools in Georgia started August 1st. And it was like, oh, we need to have a place to move to before August 1st so that Skylar can start school. And so we're just like, I mean, and the reason why I'm focusing more on Skylar is because AJ is virtual. So it didn't matter where we were living. He would still be able to attend school. So anyways, at this point in July now, we knew that the destination was Georgia, but we did not have a place of residence, which made it difficult to try to register Skylar for school early because we did not have a residence to provide for. Another thing was that a part of registering her for school, she needed to do a physical by a Georgia physician. So we needed to be here in Georgia in order for her to have that physical done in order to get her registered for school. You see what I'm saying? So, and then on top of that, like we didn't have a job. So it's just like, Lord, how are we going to move to Georgia with no job and no place to live? And again, Anthony's told, I don't want y'all to move based on a job. If that ain't a leap of faith, like, who does that, y'all? Who moves someplace without having a job lined up? Who quits a job without having another job lined up? Like, that's just not what people normally do. I know people have done it. We have now done that. But like, it just seemed crazy. Do you understand now why I said to God, you got Anthony and I out here looking like fools? Like, we telling people we moving, but we don't have the answers to any of these questions. This sounds crazy. It looks crazy. I think it's crazy. So obviously the people that I'm talking to, they think it's crazy too, right? And so then that's when he sent me, he had my friend send me that devotion on Hebrews 11. Now, even with that, I had already been studying Hebrews 11 and just really, reading about the different people of faith who believed God and who trusted God and went. And so I knew when I saw at the top of the devotion, it said Hebrews 11, I knew that was God speaking to me. And then when I read it, and I read when the author said, faith is the willingness to look foolish, I was like, okay, I got you, God. I hear what you're saying. And I'm like, and I'm being honest with you, God. Okay, I hear you. And this just seems crazy. But in the words of Pastor Michael Todd, it's only crazy until it happens. Hey, y'all. So you're going to have to come back for part 2 of this testimony in the making, where things begin to get tight. So if you want to find out how tight it got and how we made it through, come and join us for part 2.